Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for stopping back by Sandy Bottom Homestead. And I got to tell you, now is the time of year to do the most important thing for your garden. And you're not going to believe as simple as it is, but there's actually a lot to it. I mean, look here, check it out. You look in the gardens and you see a very common factor amongst all of them for the most part, and that is the presence of mulch in the gardens. And not all mulch is created equal. I know you're thinking, well, that's crazy, mulch is mulch. And while you would think that, and that some parts of the year that is correct, that is not true. You know, a while back I did a video, a couple years ago now, about straw mulch. And a lot of you, in fact, are here because of that video, in which I appreciate you being here and thank you so much for following me for as long as you have. That being said, I do want to expand on that subject just a little bit because I did a series covering the three major types of mulches. I did wood chips, leaves, and straw. And they're not all equal, and I made it very clear that I in fact hate wood chips. But there's a factor to mulch that we need to understand. There is a time that it is absolutely perfect to put it into your garden, and it will speed up the entire process. If you're in this to look for quick remedies, you are in the wrong place, champ. I'm here to tell you this whole gardening / homesteading situation is the long game. Let me tell you, it is hard to correct something. And I want to walk around here and I want to show you just real quickly before I get into the main part of it, the beds that have mulch in it and the beds that don't, and explain to you why, and most importantly, why they don't have mulch in it, even though they should. Clearly, we've got two new garden beds here. They're not mulched because this one's gonna be planted soon. This one needs more soil put in. So we're not even gonna add that into it yet. We will end up mulching this bed, but not now. Now, all the other beds over here are all mulched, and we're using straw mulch for all of them. Now, the wild garden, which is the garden that needs the mulch the most, doesn't really have any mulch in it. And that's crazy. So like this garden bed, none of them really have a lot of mulch in them. And it's kind of, you wonder like, why, Ben, if it's so important, why do you not have any mulch in this bed? And it's pretty simple if you think about it. Mostly it's just because of what's planted in the bed. These beds are not planted with mulch friendly plants. That doesn't mean you can't mulch them, but it means I don't like to mulch them. So we have a lot of root crops in here. We've got carrots, we've got parsnips, and we've got a lot of daikon radishes in here. And the daikon radishes are the true driller of them all, meaning they drill into the soil to help with the compaction, but so do the carrots and parsnips. Now the thing is you plant them so close together, it would be an absolute nightmare to get them all mulched just right. So we're not even gonna worry about it. But the front half of this bed, we just reseeded with spinach like 2 days ago. So we're not gonna do that because they're so closely spaced. We're gonna wait for them to pop up, and then we're gonna put thin layers of mulch in between the plants to kind of help with them. But for the most part, we don't wanna do that. Now, if we have compacted soils, how does this help the soil? Well, I'm so glad you asked that. And if you didn't, you should. So compacted soil is essentially, there's no channels for nutrients to go through. Water doesn't absorb well, anything like that. And so we want to help with the compaction. So this bed's not as bad as it was, but it still is. And we've got to work on this. And what the mulch does is you put it on top of the soil, clearly, and then it breaks down. But as it breaks down, it adds organic matter back into the soil. And that's really, really important. So it'll lay that organic matter down right on top of the soil. So this is basically organic matter from mulch. Because I haven't turned this bed or anything like that, this bed's mulch is completely broken down. So it's basically what you're looking at. And as you work this into the soil, either you work it or nature works it, it helps with compaction. Now, does that mean that we can't use mulch for non-compacted soils? And that is absolutely not. You definitely want to use it for non-compacted soils because it will help prevent it from being compacted. So there is one aspect of it. And all these beds over here, they are not compacted. We did, however, have an issue from having too much organic matter at one point, but that's for a different day. We're not going to worry about that. We're going to focus on the subject at hand. Before I grab my mulch and I tell you the exact time to use mulch and what exactly to look for to help you to get it in your garden as fast as possible. I want to go over the different benefits and not benefits of each mulch, just to recap briefly. So not all mulch is created equal, and some are more nutrient dense than others. Now the most nutrient dense of them all, which we're not really going to cover, is hay. And the reason why I'm not going to cover it, because when I did my straw video, I got so much hate because I called it hay even though it was straw, because of the fact that there may be seeds in it and cause people to have to weed, that we're going to totally omit it from this conversation. Being said, in the three that I've given you, the number one most nutrient dense mulch would be, in my mind, dried leaves. Number one. Now you can use dried grass clippings and stuff like that, but we're not going to consider that, because right now, where are you going to get grass clippings? Nobody's cutting their grass. It's all done. And if you look around me, you can see there are leaves starting to fall now. And so we will be raking up leaves at some point, shredding them down, and getting them into our garden. And this is the number one most nutrient dense you can get. It's also completely free. So remember that. But the problem is it's only free at a certain time of year. Next one is going to be straw. Now this happens to be my personal favorite as far as aesthetics and cost, because I can get it year round, I can keep it on hand, and I like the way it looks in my garden. It doesn't have as much nutrients in it, but it's so available that it has to be, in my mind, it has to be above the wood chips. Because wood chips have a definite downfall built into using them as soil. And you wouldn't believe it, but they definitely take away from your soil before they add to it. Now this is a terrible thing to say, but the wood chips just didn't work out for me. In the year that I used them, I had the worst garden I've ever had in my entire life. And that's because it caused nitrogen tie-up. And so what that means is if you put fresh nitrogen into the soil, or excuse me, fresh wood chips into the soil, it's going to tie up that nitrogen in order to break it down. So you need to add more. Well, part of it was I didn't realize that, but then the other part is I just don't want to do that. So in my mind, that is one of the worst, but it can become the best once it starts doing its thing. The other thing is it's set me up to have years of roly-poly issues. Some people like to call them pill bugs, but look, I'm 8 years old at heart. They're roly-polies, and they will decimate your seedlings. So I'm gonna have to put that one at the bottom of the list. I'm gonna walk over here, and I'm gonna show you my little mulch pile, what's left of it, and we're gonna talk about it. But when I show it to you, I'm gonna give you a quiz. So I want you to get your brains flowing. And what I want you to do is tell me in the comments below what you think is the trigger to tell me when to use this mulch the most. So this is just a bale, actually it's a bale and a half of straw at this point. While you're giving me the answers to that, I want to tell you what I use my straw for. So I use it for mulch. I use it for my chickens behind me. We put it in there, we layer it on top of the bottom of the coop, and the run acts as a carbon layer to the nitrogen of their manure, neutralizes the smell, basically creates compost inside of the chicken coop as they scratch it around. The other thing is we use it for our compost piles. For instance, to go off the other one, the other day we scooped out our coop. It was a little bit dirtier than it should. I know, terrible, but it happens. And it smelled pretty damn bad. Added it to this pile, and you can't really tell, but I came back and I put a couple handfuls of the straw on top of it, and guess what? The smell went away. You're starting to see why mulch is so important. We're factored into growing, composting, chickens, the whole nine. It just works out great. So that being said, let's go back to our question of our pop quiz. And then this is the time in which to actually get this and use it inside of your garden. So we'll just take handfuls of it, and it is a little bit heavier at this point, but it's so good. I'll take you guys for a ride in my wheelbarrow. Take you a ride in my wheelbarrow as long as the camera will stay up. So the question is now, there's a lot of questions here. Why is it that you wait until this time of year to do it? So think about your weather right now. It's cooler and it's what? Wetter. Well, typically, we haven't had rain for a month until recently. But we had 2 days of like really light rain, which was perfect. But because it's cooler, this mulch does not dry out as fast, especially when it's sitting around waiting. And that's absolutely perfect. That's what you want. You want it to sit there, you want it to stay moist, you want it to start to break down, decompose, and then you can move on with your life and add it to your garden. And that's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna fill this whole half of this bed with this mulch and really shoot it off as a rocket. I'm gonna come back and tell you the method that I use in order to make sure that this stuff breaks down, because you want it to break down as much as possible before spring. 30 seconds later, because it's wet and heavy, just plops right down. And we've got like a nice 5-inch level of mulch on there that will break down over time. Now I do want to prove to you that it's going to break down over time, and we can do that right here in the garden. I can show you. I've got multiple beds that have been mulched at different times, and the one that's been mulched the longest is, well, it's a toss-up between the Brussels sprouts and the lettuce bed. But let's just stick with the Brussels sprouts for now, just because I'm getting excited about them. This bed was mulched with 4 inches of mulch in July. Okay, so you can see that it is definitely mulched. But when we come down and we take a closer look, there was 4 inches on there. Now look, there's like 1/4 of an inch of mulch on there. And that's perfect. And all that right there is fresh organic matter. Come spring, we will just lightly turn that in, incorporate it into the soil very lightly, and we're gonna have fresh organic matter incorporated into our garden. Now here's the method that I use, other than getting it when it's starting to decompose. Does the same, leaves nice and wet. I never rake them up right away. I let them sit on the ground for a while, let them get a couple rains, let them get dry, chop them up, and then I will add them, because they will already started the process even a little bit. And then we'll do their same with wood chips. You let them sit for a while and you will have fire, but you gotta let them sit for a while and let them start to decompose, and that's when they get better. So what we'll end up doing is I'll come back as these beds empty out and they're done for the year, because remember, that's my goal for the year, is to have them sit for at least 1 month. We will come by, let's say the lettuce bed gets empty. It's probably gonna be one of the first beds to get empty. We'll put shredded leaves down, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna put compost on top of it. Now, I didn't mention compost as a mulch, and I know a lot of people think of it as a mulch. I do not. What I think of it is a weight and an additive. What I mean by weight is if I come out here and I put dry shredded leaves down and you get a typical fall storm for our area, guess what's gonna be all over your yard? Fresh shredded leaves from the garden. So we'll put the compost on top of all that, and it'll just weight it down. As it rains, it will push that compost down into the leaves, contact the soil, and now you're creating channels within it in order to make air go through to continue to cook it. So you're creating a sandwich effect. And also what I'll do is I'll come back around the same time, or at the same time, I will put in hot chicken manure, which is fresh manure from our coop, because the goal is you gotta let it cool or age in the garden for, I don't know, roughly a month or so. So we'll do that if we have time. And what we'll definitely do is then we'll come back as well and we'll put a 10-10-10 fertilizer down. Because it's organic, it will take time to break down, it will feed it, and it will speed up that process. Now, I know you may be thinking, as I am, like, what does speed up the process mean? I don't know what it means, but I know it makes me feel better, and I'm gonna go with it. Sometimes that's all you need, is something to make you feel a little bit better. But when we do all that, that's how we charge our gardens and we get them off to a good start for the spring, because you get a lot from the manure, you get a lot of nitrogen-rich soil, and then we can put another round of cabbages, broccolis, all that stuff in that loves nitrogen. It'll soak all that up, and then we're just kind of refilling as we plant for the next seasons. So that's really the trick to really revamping your soil and using this mulch. Now, if you've made it this long in the video, which I hope you have, then I want to urge you to think of mulch not as a water retentive properties, not as weed preventative, but as a soil builder, as a rebuilder. That's really what is key to it all. And that's how I look at it. I look at it as all of these properties together, but as I add them to my garden, I see the bigger benefit to it. And that's what's so important. So please, please think of your mulch as a rebuilder and use it appropriately. And if you're worried about it, just get it right now. It's never too rotten to go into your garden. Trust me. your garden's gonna love it, and your garden will love you as you love your garden.
Good.